إلا بالله العلي العظيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له جل جلاله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله عليه الصلاة والسلام. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله صلوات الله عليه. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. اللهم اجعل قلبي بارا واملي سارا وإشكارا ورزقي دارا والعاد برارا واجعل عند قبر نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم مستقرا وقرارا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد.
عجل فرجا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجا. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين الذي بعد فلا يرى وقرب فشهد النجوى. نحمده ونستعينه ونثني عليه ونؤمن به، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف بريته ومبلغ رسالاته العبد المؤيد الرسول المسدد المحمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. عباد الله، أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله. We begin this first Friday khutbah by reminding all of you and myself to maintain the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll begin a new chapter of the book 40 Hadith, and that is, thank you, that is a chapter on the discussion of talibul ilm, the one who seeks knowledge and demands knowledge. There's a very beautiful hadith narrated from our beloved sixth Imam, Al-Imam As-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. And this is a hadith that has a very strong chain of narrators. Now, I won't go into this too much, I'll leave this for another time, but in general, within our school of thought, within lectures, within when scholars speak, one of the areas that in our school of thought, unfortunately, is not given enough attention to is that when we quote narrations, when we quote hadith, we don't usually pay attention very much to which book we're quoting this hadith from, number one. And number two, the chain of the narration. Is it a strong chain or is it a weak chain? And who are the individuals that are within this chain? Every hadith has a chain, meaning a person who's living, for example, 100 years, 200 years, 300 years after a particular imam. When he claims that a particular imam said something, he can't just throw it out there and say, well, the fifth imam said this, the sixth imam said this. He has to be able to point to who he heard this from, who then has to point to who he heard this from, who then has to do this. And usually you'll find 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 or 7 even, links within this chain. And a big part of what scholars do is sit down and take a look at who are within this chain. This is very important. There are individuals, they are known for their weird understanding, their unusual understanding, for example, of Islam. If they end up in this chain, automatically that hadith becomes a little less reliable for us, and so on and so forth. This is the science of hadith, and one that we don't have too much time to get into. The point I want to make, because this is very important, and I remember when I was growing up, I used to hear hadith all the time, and think to myself, how does this make sense with everything else that I've heard in Islam? Then when you grow up and you study a little bit more, you realize, oh, the book that's being referenced is not even a reliable book. The chain is not a reliable chain. And therefore, if I had known a little bit better, I would have taken a look at that narration and said, okay, it's not coming from a reliable source. Hence, if it doesn't mesh with the fundamentals of my faith, I can set it aside. But of course, we didn't know this growing up. Yes, I'll share this anecdote very quickly, my personal experience. I remember growing up, listening to a lot of lectures, a lot of speakers. And I'll say this especially today because it's during the break and we have a lot of our youngsters who are able to attend the Jumaa this week. It's very important. I remember growing up, hearing that speakers used to preach this idea that, you know, if you're a good person, at the end of the day, your time in the grave is going to be a good time. It's not going to be a scary time. Yes, if you're a person who didn't fear God and you gave yourself a green light to do as you wish, yes, the grave is going to be a difficult time. It's going to be a scary time beyond what a human being can possibly even imagine. Then I remember reading a hadith. This hadith was from the Holy Prophet, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Or at least it was attributed to the Prophet, that the Prophet said, every single person who ends up in the grave will have the grave pressure him. Yes, every person who makes it into the grave, even the believer, will have the grave pressure him. So I wondered to myself, well, how does this mesh? On one hand, the religion tells us, be a good person, obey, don't sin, so that you can avoid this punishment. On the other hand, the hadith says what? No matter what, you're going to deal with this punishment. And I remember for multiple years, this was an obstacle in my mind. So what does it make sense for me to obey God if I'm going to be punished at the end of the day anyways? If the moment they're going to put me in the grave is going to be a scary moment anyways, then what's the whole point of trying to have righteousness and taqwa and obeying God? I thought the whole point of that was that I would avoid that and my pathway to heaven would be opened up for me. Yes. Now, when you look into that hadith, it comes from a very weak source. This is important. This is something that within our communities and within lectures even is not done properly, and it leads to a whole can of worms are opened up by this. This is something that even the Ahl Bayt themselves taught us, that when you are hearing our hadith, you can't just hear our hadith from anyone. So Muharram comes around, Ramadan comes around, people send hadith to one another, they post hadith on social media, they do a lot of these things. Yes? When you come across a hadith, and the hadith is proposing a particular theological belief, for example, that hadith being there is the beginning of the discussion. It's not the end of the discussion on that matter. Say a hadith, I see a hadith that says, the hadith says, yes, this is what happens on the Day of Judgment. Okay, that's the beginning of the discussion. It's not the end of the discussion. The end of the discussion is after you go and see how scholars dealt with that hadith, which book is being referenced. And one thing I want our community to become more sensitive on is this: when people quote hadith, ask them, which book are you quoting from? Yes, which book are you referencing? It's interesting, you'll see on social media, 90% of the time, there's no reference. There's no reference for hadith. Say, the Prophet said this. Where did he say it? No mention. The first Imam said this. Where did he say it? No mention. And this opens a can of worms, because now anyone can attribute anything to the Prophet. And I can come here today and say, yes, the Prophet said during winter break, you should treat Sheikh Mahdi to dinner. Yes? And the Prophet said you should bring him big prizes and big gifts. Say, which book? It's, don't worry about the source, yes? Trust me, it's okay. So this is a fundamental flaw we have within our school of thought. Now, in other schools of thought, they have their own flaws in their own ways, but this is not there to this extent. Meaning, when hadith is narrated over there, typically, they'll tell you, okay, this is Bukhari, this is Muslim, this is Tirmidhi, this is this is that. There's other flaws that we have and other issues that we have, but at least when it comes to referencing, this is very important. Now, when it comes to this narration that, of course, we'll have a little bit of time to go into, I'll leave the rest for the following Jumaa, inshallah. This is a chain that is a very strong chain. You have very special companions of the sixth Imam that are within this chain. Ali ibn Ibrahim, Hammad ibn Isa, these are close companions of the sixth Imam. So the sixth Imam, unlike all of these other companions, he quotes the Prophet directly. And this is a point we've talked about in the past as well. That when the sixth Imam says, Qala, the messenger of God said, the Prophet of Allah said, he never says, I heard it from this person, who heard it from this person, who heard it from this person. Everybody else has to say, I heard it from this person, who heard it from this person, who heard it. Meaning, there's no divine inspiration here. Someone came and told me this hadith, and that person was told by someone else, and so on and so forth. But when the sixth Imam says, the Prophet of Allah said, you find in our narrations, he never says who he heard it from. Yes, you and I would assume he heard it from his father, who heard it from his father, from the other Imams, all the way going back to the Prophet. But the Imam, he doesn't even find the need for him to say who I heard this hadith from. Yes? He says, no, the Prophet of Allah said this. Well, the sixth Imam, was he alive during the time of the Prophet? No. Technically, he's not a Sahabi in the sense that he was not acquainted with the Holy Prophet. Neither was the fifth Imam, nor was the fourth Imam. But when they speak from a divine inspiration. Hence, everybody else has to say who they heard this from. But when it comes to the Imam himself, he says, Qala Rasulullah. He's skipping multiple chains. But he says, the Messenger of Allah said the following. So now let us get into this narration that the sixth Imam is narrating from directly from the Holy Prophet Muhammadin al-Mustafa salawatullahi wassalamu alayhi. He said, and this is a long narration, he said, Man salaka tariqan yatlubu fihi ilman. The one who walks a path in which he is seeking knowledge through this path. He's taking steps towards gaining knowledge. Salakallahu bihi tariqan ila al-jannah. The same way he's on this path towards knowledge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will automatically place him on a path towards heaven. So he is making an effort to gain this knowledge. And the hadith says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make that path a path towards heaven for him. Okay, the narration continues. وَإِنَّ الْمَلَائِكَ, and surely the angels, لَتَذَعُ أَجْنِحَتَهَا لِطَالِبِ الْعِلْمِ رِضًا بِهِ. When this person is on this path, he's taking these steps, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders the angels to come and place their wings beneath the feet of this person who's seeking knowledge. رِضًا بِهِ, because of how pleased they are with him. because of how great his status is. They come and do this. وَإِنَّهُ يَسْتَغْفِرُ لِطَالِبِ الْعِلْمِ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاءِ وَمَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. And surely the one who seeks knowledge, everything in the heavens and everything on earth, or everything within the earth, asks for his forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now each of these lines, inshallah, will go into more depth and detail with regards to them. حَتَّى الْحُوتِ فِي الْبَحْرِ. Even the whale in the sea or the ocean. وَفَضْلُ الْعَالِمِ عَلَى الْعَابِدِ. And the greater status that the knowledgeable person has over the one who worships only but without knowledge. Yes? He's abid. He worships. He is devout. But he doesn't seek deeper knowledge of his faith. He says, وَفَضْلُ الْعَالِمِ, the knowledgeable one, his status compared to the one who's only worshipping is like what? He said, كَفَضْلِ الْقَمَرِ عَلَى صَائِرِ النُّجُومِ, is like the status of the moon compared to the stars. Yes, the moon, nobody can miss the moon. If it's at night and the moon is actually out, nobody can miss it. It's very obvious, it's very clear. You see it very clearly. Especially if the narration is saying Laylat al-Badr, in the middle of the month. And the 13th, 14th, 15th, this is of course when the moon is the most complete. Yes? It says this is the difference between the one who seeks knowledge, his faith is coupled with knowledge, versus the one who only worships, the one who is only devout. وَإِنَّ الْعُلَمَاءَ وَرَثَةُ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ. And the one who seeks knowledge is walking in the footsteps and is inheriting the message of the prophets. وَإِنَّ الْعُلَمَاءَ وَرَثَةُ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ وَإِنَّ الْأَنْبِيَاءَ لَمْ يُوَرِّثُوا دِينَارًا وَلَا دِرْهَمًا. The prophets of God, when it comes to these scholars, these people of knowledge, a scholar might be a particular individual you picture. The narration is saying alim. Anyone can become alim. Anyone can increase his knowledge. He becomes more, he has more knowledge now. So it's not just a scholar. It's you and I, all of us. He said, وَإِنَّ الْأَنْبِيَاءَ لَمْ يُوَرِّثُوا دِينَارًا وَلَا دِرْهَمًا. They don't leave dinar and dirham for these people who walk in their footsteps. You know what they leave behind for them? وَلَكِنْ وَرَّثُوا الْعِلْمَ. They leave knowledge behind for them. For their own family, they might leave dinar and dirham. Yes, like we had in the story of Fadak. That was regarding their own family. Separate discussion. As it relates to these scholars or anyone who wants to benefit from their knowledge, this is what the prophets leave behind for them. فَمَنْ أَخَذَ مِنْهُ أَخَذَ بِحَذٍ وَافِرٍ. So whoever benefits from the knowledge of the prophets, then he has walked away with indeed a heavy benefit. Let us begin by going through the first of these lines. Inshallah, I'll go through today and the rest, inshallah, in the following week. Aloud salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. The first line of the narration said, "Man salaka tariqan yatlubu fihi ilma." The one who is on a path to seek knowledge. Salakallahu bihi tariqan ila al-jannah. Allah will make that path a path towards heaven to him. So, the author of 40 hadith starts to explain to us the different levels of heaven. Typically, we hear of heaven having 7 levels, maybe 8 levels, maybe. Sometimes these are mistaken with the gates and the doors into heaven that are narrated to be 8. Yes? The author of 40 hadith says there are 3 main levels to heaven. There is the level of heaven that is tied directly to the good deeds that the human being does. Meaning, God tells me to pray, I pray. God tells me to fast, I fast. God tells me to give sadaqah and give charity, I give charity, I give sadaqah. This is called the heaven of deeds, meaning it's tied to the deed that you did. Jannatul A'mal, the heaven of deeds. Believe it or not, this is one of the lowest levels of heaven. Now, for you and I, if we can make it even here, that would be really cool and really nice. Yes, I'll be happy for sure, right? But he's going into deeper discussions. There is Jannatul A'mal, the heaven of deeds. Then there is Jannatul Sifat, the heaven of attributes and features. What does this mean? It means the human being in his growth has multiple levels. There is a level where only at the level of his actions he obeys God. Yes? God tells him to give charity here, he gives charity. But he doesn't do it frequently enough and in such a deep manner that he himself becomes a generous person. See, there's a difference between the two. There's a difference between the two. There's a time you give charity, that is Jannatul A'mal. You will be rewarded for that charity. You'll be rewarded heavily for that charity. There is a time where you do it in such a way where that becomes your characteristic. You are a generous person. You didn't just give charity. You have now become a generous person. This is a second level. And for this second level of your growth, there's a separate heaven. It's not that heaven. It is greater, though we can't fully imagine these different levels. But this is what we're told. There's Jannatul A'mal, just based off of what you did. There is Jannatul Sifat, based on who you became, based on your characteristics. Because if you did those deeds long enough and well enough, they start to seep into you and they start to change who you are at your core. That this is the second level of this heaven. Then there is a third level. It is called Jannatul Dhat. And that is when not only you do good deeds, not only that changes who you are in terms of your characteristics. Slowly, you don't start to see yourself anymore. You no longer see an independence for yourself anymore. The basic level, you just do whatever God told you till you make it into heaven. This is the basic level. The second level, no, you actually take on these attributes. It starts to become part of who you are. Third level, it starts to change how you look at the world. You don't see yourself as independent anymore. You see God's presence everywhere. Now, these are deeper concepts. These are deeper things. But all of this starts from where? It starts from the basic obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the narration said, listen, if you make your way towards knowledge, and of course in this hadith, the main purpose of the hadith is religious knowledge, yes? Any type of knowledge that can aid you in terms of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any type of knowledge that can be helpful on this path. Allah will make that path a path towards heaven for you. That will automatically make its way towards heaven for you. You will be on your way towards heaven. This is the first line of this narration. Which level of heaven? It depends on which type of knowledge it is that you are trying to gain. Then he says, on this path, as you're taking steps, وَإِنَّ الْمَلَائِكَ لَتَضَعُ أَجْنِحَتَهَا. The angels will come, they will place their wings under the feet of this person. This is the status of this person. Gaining knowledge doesn't mean you drop everything, you go to Hawza. That might be one option of it, yes? Gaining knowledge means Friday prayer is here, I want to go and learn. This is gaining knowledge, yes? Gaining knowledge means I'm in the car. Instead of listening to just something random, maybe I put on a lecture, maybe I put on Quran, maybe I put on something that I can utilize this time that I have, yes? It can come in a whole set, a whole different ways of shapes and forms, gaining this knowledge. He said when this person is on his path towards knowledge, the angels come and place their wings beneath the feet of this person. لِطَالِبِ الْعِلْمِ رِضًا بِهِ, because of how pleased they are with this person. Now, the world of the angels is a spectacular world. It's a world out there that we don't know too much about. Hence, you find in the verses of the Quran, at the very beginning of Surah Al-Fatir, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the following. He says, the angels that I have created, أُولِي أَجْنِحَةٍ مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ. Some of them have 2 wings, some of them have 3 wings, some of them have 4 wings, ruba'. And then the Quran continues, يَخْلُقُ مَا يَشَاءُ, and He creates whatever He likes. In other words, there might be tens or hundreds of other creatures that we don't know about. This is a world that we are not fully familiar with. Yes? It is a world that we believe in because we believe in al-ghayb, because we believe in the unseen. These are all unseens. Yes? Okay. The author starts to explain to us the different types of angels that are out there. Now, before I go into this, the reason why this is important is because it takes our perspective from this world and it broadens our horizon. When your horizon is broadened, when you understand there's more to life than the basics of what we see every day. How much money am I making? What did this person say? I don't know, did we get the house? Did we not get the house? Did I invest in this? Did I not? These are the basics of life. It's part of life. But one needs to broaden his horizon to understand how many other things are happening in this world as we speak. How many other? This is part of the goal and the mission of religion, is to broaden your horizon from a person who only deals with the material world to become a person who also deals with the immaterial world, who understands there's greater realities in life than these. When this happens, this person, when he has broader horizons, he's able to sacrifice for the next world easier because his worldview has changed. Yes? He's able to go through the difficulties of this world easier. You see the people of Palestine, how they persevere in these types of things that we see. We can't even imagine the pain. Mothers carrying children, so on and so forth. Yes? This is a person who has a broader horizon. That's why they'll say, when something happens, they'll say, Hasbi Allah wa ni'mal wakil. Allah is enough for me. Allah is enough for me. Is God protecting you from all the difficulties? No, He's not protecting them from the difficulties. The difficulties are there. They're dealing with the difficulties, yes? But she sees a different world. She sees a world where all of this is going to count. She sees a world where there's someone else in charge. This is a person who has broader horizons. They don't just see the 2 + 2 of this world. See something else happening. So the author starts to go into the other groups of angels. What are these groups of angels? وَسِنْفٌ مِّنْهُمْ. There are a group of angels. مَلَائِكَةٌ عَاشِقُونَ مَجْذُوبُونَ. There are angels. They don't even know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created the rest of creation. They are so drawn to God Himself and the beauty of God Himself, they are unaware of anything else that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. These are angels. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created them, and at the moment of their creation, they are so drawn to Him, they don't notice anything. They don't pay attention to anything. Their role is to be drawn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You and I don't see that beauty. That's why we're not drawn to it. But they are shown this beauty, and they are drawn to it. He says this is one group of angels. These are the closest angels of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Malaikatun muqarrabun, as they say. Then there are others. There are other malaika. They also are in charge of the highest heavens of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is a third group of malaika. They are the ones who are in charge of the world of barzakh, between the material world and the immaterial world. Is a world that lies in between them. They are in charge of that world. And then the fourth or fifth group of these angels are the angels that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells them to take care of the affairs of the material world. Those are the angels that you and I have heard of and that we deal with. It's a whole world out there. It's a different thing out there. More angels than you and I can even imagine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. A portion of them we deal with. And even that portion that we deal with, we don't fully comprehend. We don't fully understand. What does it mean Jibreel comes down? What does that even mean? What does it mean when someone's soul is going to be taken from their body, that Israel comes and quote unquote takes the soul? We don't understand these realities. Yes? This is why the first Imam, Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, he has in his khutbahs a very beautiful line. He says to a person who asked him about the essence of God, he was trying to understand what God is like. He said, how can you ask me about the essence of God, where an angel of God, he's referring to Malakul Maut, he's referring to Israel, the angel that comes to take the soul at the end of the life, yes? He said, how do you ask me to describe God to you when we cannot even understand the work of an angel of God? When Malakul Maut comes to take this soul, what do we know even? We only see the results. We see this person was talking one moment, the next moment is not speaking anymore. And these are the angels of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the narration says, when you go on this path to seek knowledge, the angels come. These angels, they come to place their wings beneath the feet of the human being. Now, when they say that these angels come and do this, is this a metaphor? Or is this literally what they do? It seems as though it is a literal process, meaning that the human being has reached such a high status that the angel feels worthy to come and place his wings under your feet. All of this while in the day-to-day life of yours, the only thing you did was picked up a book to read, maybe listened to a lecture, maybe I read a quote from an imam. This is all happening, well, with this very simple step that you took. And this teaches us, brothers and sisters, that there's a lot happening in the world around us. Though sometimes it may not feel like it to us, but there's a lot that's happening in the world around us. When you do a good deed, these angels, up and down, there are some of them, they take your deeds up to the skies. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks at the intention of your deed. Let me take a look if he did it with the right intention. Sometimes the narrations say, the angel comes and takes the deed up. And when they take the deed up to present it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no, return the deed back to him. I don't want this one. Why, Ya Allah? He did a good deed. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, yes, he did the good deed, but he had other intentions. He didn't do it for me. So take down the deed. All of this while you decided to open the Quran maybe, do kindness unto your parents, forgive a spouse, be kind in the house to the women, to the husbands, to the children, whatever the case. These simple things that we do, they create thousands of waves in the other realms. But you and I don't see them. That is why Quran and Ahl Bayt have come to tell us of the real impact of those deeds. When you give that sadaqah, what happens in the other realms? When you do wudu, what happens in the other realms? Yes, only thing that happened for you is you woke up 5 o'clock in the morning and you lost your sleep now. That's the only thing that happened in a material sense. In an immaterial sense, your whole soul was purified. This is a different world, and this is why we go to Quran and Hadith, to broaden our horizons when it comes to what's really happening in this world. So inshallah, with that, we'll bring the second khutbah to an end. In the following week, we'll go through these two lines and the following lines in more detail, inshallah. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. اللهم صل على محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. أثني عليه حامدا وأذكره مسبحا ثم أصلي وأسلم على نجيبه وجليله وحافظ سره الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرضين بأبي القاسم محمد. صلى الله على محمد وعلى محمد. اللهم صل وسلم على علي أمير المؤمنين وفاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين وعلى سبطي نبي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة وعلى علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي حججك على عبادك وأمنائك في أرضك صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات. عباد الله أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله. We begin the second Friday khutbah by reminding all of you and myself to maintain the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We will inshallah continue in this khutbah with some of the narrations that we have with regards to that moment where the soul of the human being reaches the hulqum. And we touched on this briefly in the last Friday khutbah that we had, that this moment of the soul reaching the hulqum, the soul reaching the throat, in the words of Ahlul Bayt and the terminology of the Ahlul Bayt, has become part of their vocabulary. It is part of their vocabulary that they constantly say, when the soul reaches here, when the soul reaches here. And a multitude of narrations we have where they point to their neck and they point to their throat. Meaning, in some narrations, they said when the soul reaches the throat. In some narrations, the narrator says, no. He said when the soul reaches here, وَأَوْمَأَ بِيَدِهِ, and then he pointed with his finger to his throat. This is a term and a vocabulary that you find over and over in our narrations. There was one narration we touched on in the previous week. I'll quickly go over that. And then inshallah we'll move on to the following narrations. This one is also from the sixth Imam, Al-Imam As-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. The sixth Imam turned to his companion by the name of Uqba. He said, Ya Uqba, لا يقبل الله من العباد يوم القيامة إلا هذا الأمر الذي أنتم عليه. He said, Uqba, know that on the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask people of our wilayah and whether they were accepting of it or not. And of course, this is in the context that someone was presented with this truth. Yes? If someone wasn't presented with this truth, then of course they're not going to be held accountable to this. He said, وَمَا بَيْنَ أَحَدِكُمْ وَبَيْنَ أَنْ يَرَى مَا تَقِرُّ بِهِ عَيْنُهُ إِلَّا أَنْ تَبْلُغَ نَفْسُهُ إِلَى هَذِهِ. And he said, the only distance, the only gap between you guys seeing all of the rewards that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised for you. Only thing separating you from seeing all of those rewards is what? Is your soul reaching the throat. Meaning the moment that happens, immediately means all the rewards, you are going to begin to see them. ثُمَّ اتَّكَأَ. Then he says, the sixth Imam, he leaned back, as if to say, that was the end of what he was trying to say. It was over. So he leaned back. وَكَانَ مَعِي الْمُعَلَّى. Uqba says, Mu'alla ibn Khunais, another one of the companions of the Imam, was with me. فَغَمَزَنِي أَنْ أَسْأَلَهُ. So he pushed me, he gestured to me. Why don't you ask him more about that moment? When the soul reaches the throat and reaches the hulqum, what happens? فَغَمَزَنِي أَنْ أَسْأَلَهُ. He told me to go and ask. فَقُلْتُ يَا ابْنَ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ فَإِذَا بَلَغَتْ نَفْسُهُ هَذِهِ أَيَّ شَيْءٍ يَرَى. If his soul comes to his throat, it's a final moment, what will he see? So I asked the question. And he says, the Imam responded, يَرَى, he'll see. وَلَا يَزِيدُ عَلَيْهَا. But he didn't tell me what he'll see. So I asked again, what will he see? And the Imam said, he'll see. And multiple times, he says, I counted nearly 10 times. Every time I asked, what will he see? The Imam said, he will see it. It's definitive. It's definitely going to happen. He's definitely going to see this. وَلَا يَزِيدُ عَلَيْهَا. But he wouldn't tell me what. At the last time I asked him, ثُمَّ جَلَسَ فِي آخِرَهَا. Finally, he gathered himself. فَقَالَ يَا عُقْبَةَ. I said, Uqba, أَبَيْتَ إِلَّا أَن تَعْلَمْ. It seems like you're not willing to let go of this one. Meaning, you really, really want to know. Yes? He said, yes, Ya ibn Rasulullah, I get my faith from you. Can you tell me what is it that this person sees? He said, فَرَقَّ. So the Imam felt sorry for me. Meaning, at this point, he's like, okay, I'll tell you. No problem. Out of kindness, I'll tell you what's going to happen. فَقَالَ يَرَاهُمَا وَاللَّهِ. By Allah, he will see the two of them. يَرَاهُمَا وَاللَّهِ. By Allah, he will see the two of them. So I asked, Ya ibn Rasulullah, who are the two of them? Man huma? Who are these two that you're referring to? قال ذلك رسول الله وعلي عليه السلام. Allah salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Ya Uqba, O Uqba, no, لن تموت نفس مؤمنة أبدا حتى تراهما. There's no one who will die except he will see them. He will see the two of them. فقلت له يقولان شيئا. When they meet him, are they going to say anything to him? What's the interaction like? قال نعم. He said, yes. يدخلان جميعا على المؤمن. They both enter upon this believer. فيجلس رسول الله عند رأسه. So the Prophet sits at his head and the first Imam sits at his legs. And the Prophet turns to him and says, Ya wali Allah abshir, O friend of Allah, good news for you. Inni khayrun laka mimma tarakta min ad-dunya. Everything that you had in the dunya, I am better than that for you. In other words, I'm simplifying. All the good times you had in this world, being with me is going to be so much better than all of that. Everything that you had a hope of, that I would have this in this world and I would have that in that world, I'm here with you. My acquaintance, better than all of that. And then the narration continues that then the first Imam comes and sits near his head and he says, I am that Ali. أنا علي ibn Abi Talib الذي كنت تحبه. I am that Ali that you used to love. أما لأنفعنك. Today I will take care of you. Today I will benefit you. And then he continues. He says, Ya Rasulullah, Ya ibn Rasulullah, where is this in the book of Allah? Where are you getting this from? He says in Surah Yunus, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَكَانُوا يَتَّقُونَ. Those who believe and they consistently feared Allah. Feared Allah doesn't mean they were perfect. We've talked about this before. Fear Allah means when they did wrong, firstly, it wasn't easy. They wouldn't jump towards sin. Shaitan had to work a lot to get them to sin. First of all. Second of all, when they did, they repented. This is a standard all of us can achieve. This is not a high standard, by the way. This is a standard all of us can achieve. Make it difficult. Make Shaitan do a lot of work. Don't just let him give you a green light and then you walk towards sin. Make him work for it. Now, if he works for it and then you fall short, then you repent. This is a person who's muttaqi. This is a person who fears Allah. Fears Allah doesn't mean he sits in the corner, his hands are shaking. Fears Allah means when he comes across sin, he says, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. That's his default mindset. He said, where is this? When the Quran says, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَكَانُوا يَتَّقُونَ, those who believe and they continuously feared Allah, لَهُمُ الْبُشْرَى فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ. They will have the glad tidings, the good news in this world and in the akhirah. The one in the akhirah is pretty clear. The one in the akhirah, of course, many angels will give you glad tidings. Which is the one in this world? Multiple narrations point to the idea that before this person has left this world, the Prophet and the first Imam come to give him what? This bushra. They come to give him this glad tiding that everything that you were fearful of, it's done. The calamities of this world, done. Every reward that you were looking forward to, now that is going to be available to you. All of this happens when? إِذَا بَلَغَتْ هَذِهِ, when the soul reaches the throat. Aloud salawat, please. This same moment in another narration, the Prophet shares. He says, when the soul reaches this point, then that's the final point to do anything good. That's the final moment. And hence the Prophet in this narration that we're going to read, he says, let you be the one who does those good deeds before the soul reaches this point. Because once it reaches this point, the good deeds don't count anymore. Why? Because you already see the next world. You already see the Prophet. You already see the first Imam. Of course, at that point, everyone is going to be a good person, yes? That's not going to count anymore. There's no more unseen anymore. There's no more ghaib anymore. You're already seeing the next world. It's all shahada. It is all seen for you at that point. So there's no more benefit at that point. So what does the Prophet say? The Prophet says, سُئِلَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَآلِهِ أَيُّ الصَّدَقَةِ أَفْضَلُ. He said, which charity, question was asked to the Prophet, which charity is the best of charity? قال أن تصدق وأنت صحيح شحيح تأمل البقاء وتخاف الفقر. He said, you know what the best of charity is? Now maybe this person was expecting a form of charity. Maybe they were expecting the Prophet to say, for example, build a hospital or an orphan or this or that. But the Prophet's going to answer the question from a different angle. He said, I'll tell you what the best form of sadaqah is. He said the best form of sadaqah is when you give sadaqah وَأَنْتَ صَحِيحٌ, and everything is going well in life. You're not ill. You don't feel like the time of your death is near. You're not struggling to breathe anymore. No, everything is fine. You're completely healthy. If anyone were to look at you, they'd say this person will live for another 20 years. The Prophet said that's when the best time is to give sadaqah. وَأَنْتَ صَحِيحٌ, you are doing well. شَحِيحٌ تَأْمُلُ الْبَقَاء, you look at your life, you think, well, I'll probably live for another 5-10 years at the very least. Everything is fine. And he continued, وَتَخَافُ الْفَقْرَ, and in the meanwhile, shaitan comes into you and says, listen, if you give this one, you're going to get poor yourself. What about yourself? Now, what about yourself is a valid point. We have verses of the Quran that say you don't give too much in sadaqah. But what about yourself that shaitan whispers? And what about yourself that Quran says? Very different from each other. Yes? Now this person is in this position. Now he wants to give $20 and shaitan can. What about yourself? What are you going to do? Well, I'm not giving away my whole house. I'm giving away a minimal amount. He said that's when giving sadaqah is the best. وَلَا تُمَهِّلْ, and don't give it time and delay it and postpone it. Until what point comes? حَتَّى إِذَا بَلَغَتِ الْحُلْقُومِ, until your soul reaches the throat. He said don't delay it until that point. Why? قلت لفلان كذا ولفلان كذا وقد كان لفلان. Then you're gonna, at that point, meaning on your deathbed, then you say, okay, now this belongs to this person. Now he's giving things away now. This belongs to this person. This belongs to this person. The Prophet said, don't let it reach that point. The best form of sadaqah is when you're healthy, you're doing well, everything seems fine. That's when you're supposed to give your sadaqah. Because once it reaches this point, then of course, everything is going to be done. One more narration, inshallah, we'll wrap up this second khutbah. Loud salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. The last narration is also from the sixth Imam, Al-Imam As-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. When he recited these verses, فَلَوْلَا إِذَا بَلَغَتِ الْحُلْقُومُ وَأَنْتُمْ حِينَئِذٍ تَنْظُرُونَ from Surah Waqi'ah that we've been through multiple times, when he came to the end, فَقَالَ إِنَّهَا إِذَا بَلَغَتِ الْحُلْقُومُ when his soul reaches his throat, ثُمَّ أُرِيَ مَنْزِلَهُ مِنَ الْجَنَّةِ that's when they show him his home in heaven. They show him where his reward is in heaven. It's no longer a promise. It's a reality for him now. Yes? See, some things are a promise. We don't see them with our own eyes. Some things are a reality. Like when you head out, you see the sun. You see it's day. This is not a promise. No one comes and says, oh, I think it's daytime. No, this is a reality. You see it very clearly. It says this moment, this person, his heaven goes from being a promise to being a reality for him. He will see his place in heaven. فَيَقُولُ so then he will say, رُدُّونِي إِلَى الدُّنْيَا let me go back to the dunya حَتَّى أُخْبِرَ أَهْلِي بِمَا أَرَى let me go back to this realm so that I can tell people what I see. Let me tell them what it's like. This person himself, like you and I, might have always wondered, is there really afterlife? Does it really happen? Is there really heaven, hell, all these things? So now he's finally seen it. Now that he's finally seen it, he's like, well, let me go tell everybody. Let me go and tell them what I've seen. This is right here, it's clear. Let me go tell them, they'll believe. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replies to him, and the angels reply to him, فَيُقَالُ لَهُ لَيْسَ إِلَّا ذَلِكَ سَبِيلٌ there's no path to that. That's not doable. Why is it not doable? Because for him, the unseen already became the seen. It's over. Now you want to come back to the dunya to be tested. There's no more test for you. You already saw heaven. Anyone who sees heaven, of course they're going to be a good person. Anyone who sees hellfire, of course they're going to stay away from sin. That's the easy part. That's not even a test anymore. That's like saying, well, you put your hand on the stove when it's really hot. No, of course you won't do that because you've seen and experienced that when your hand was on the stove, what happened? It burnt. That's not even faith. That's not even belief anymore. So he says, let me come back to this world. They say there's no more coming back for you. Not in a punishment. It's not a punishment. He's making his way where? Towards heaven. But the point is, there's no more point in you coming back to this world. Why? Because the whole point of you being in this world was not seeing that world and believing in it. That was the whole point. Now you did that. Now they're showing you the next world. There's no more point to return back to this world. All of these narrations point to the idea that when the soul reaches the throat, that is the bridge between this realm and the next realm. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's other narrations, I'll leave that inshallah for the following weeks. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us amongst those that when our soul reaches our throats, to make that moment a beautiful moment. To make that moment a moment that we look forward to make that moment a moment where we don't regret anything that we have done in this world. And surely, those who are still committing these atrocities that you see are happening in Palestine during these days and nights. And unfortunately, they don't stop. And unfortunately, continue. Yes, yesterday, Rafah was bombed. Rafah, for perspective, to put it into perspective, is the southernmost part of all of Gaza. Yes, it's the most southern point in all of Gaza. In other words, i.e., the part where they were always told to move towards. Yes, the excuse always was, oh, don't stay in the north. The north, we have military things happening. You should go to the south. Well, this is the most southern point, yes, of this strip known as Gaza. If you go a little bit further, you're into Egypt. This is literally what it is. And now Rafah is being bombed. What is this? This is collective punishment. Yes? This is genocide. That's what's happening. And surely these individuals, those who commit them and those who support them, and those who can speak out about them and are quiet about them, yes? Surely when the soul reaches the throat, then they're going to be in trouble. Because that moment comes and there's no more going back anymore. And they will be just like Fir'aun said in those moments. What did Fir'aun say? حَتَّى إِذَا أَدْرَكَهُ الْغَرَقِ. When he knew for sure, أَدْرَكَهُ, he knew for sure this time is not one of those previous punishments. Because he had gone through other punishments, yes? The frogs and the Nile turning into blood, and he had dealt with these, but he didn't change his path on those. This time he knew for sure. It's over. حَتَّى إِذَا أَدْرَكَهُ الْغَرَقِ قَالَ آمَنْتُ. He said, now I believe. آمَنْتُ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا الَّذِي آمَنَتْ بِهِ بَنُو إِسْرَائِيل. I believe in the God of Bani Israel. And then the Quran said, الْآنَ وَقَدْ عَسَيْتَ مِنْ قَبْلَ. Now it's too late. Now you know you're going. That is too late. And these individuals, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what their hereafter will look like. Because whatever they did in this world, surely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a punishment waiting for them that is beyond words, that we cannot put into words. Why do you think the Quran keeps saying, أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ? It's painful. Why do you think the Quran says, أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ مُهِينٌ? It's humiliating. You think God takes away the dignity of a good person, humiliates him? No. This is a person who sold his dignity in this world. And when there were families carrying their babies in their hands, he slept very well at night. Yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for this person, when his soul reaches his hulqum, boy, is that person going to be in trouble. Boy, is he going to regret what he has done. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. اللهم صل على محمد. Thank you.
Mu'mineen, we welcome everybody to CFK today, especially the visitors. I would like to request everyone to please find spaces amongst each other so that we can accommodate as many people as possible today. Please move forward when you can, and please find any empty spaces and fill them up. Thank you.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد. وأن عليا حجة الله. صلى الله عليه وسلم. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح، حي على خير العمل، حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة، قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب. يا محسن قد أتاك المسيء وقد أمرت المحسن أن يتجاوز عن المسيء. أنت المحسن وأنا المسيء، فبحق محمد وآل محمد صل على محمد وآل محمد وتجاوز عن قبيح ما تعلم مني. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض الملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين وآخرين منهم لما يلحقوا بهم وهو العزيز الحكيم ذلك فضل الله يؤتيه من يشاء والله ذو الفضل العظيم مثل الذين حملوا التوراة ثم لم يحملوها كمثل الحمار يحمل أسفارا بئس مثل القوم الذين كذبوا بآيات الله والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين قل يا أيها الذين هادوا إن زعمتم أنكم أولياء لله من دون الناس فتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين ولا يتمنونه أبدا بما قدمت أيديهم والله عليم بالظالمين قل إن الموت الذي تفرون منه فإنه ملاقيكم ثم تردون إلى عالم الغيب والشهادة فينبئكم بما كنتم تعملون يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون فإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله واذكروا الله كثيرا لعلكم تفلحون وإذا رأوا تجارة أو لهوا انفضوا إليها وتركوك قائما قل ما عند الله خير من اللهو ومن التجارة والله خير الرازقين الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم ارزقنا توفيق الطاعة وبعد المعصية اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم ارزقنا توفيق الطاعة وبعد المعصية اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، الله أكبر.
الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي تسليما.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. لا إله إلا الله، لا إله إلا الله، لا إله إلا الله.
السلام عليكم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. لا إله إلا الله العظيم الحليم. لا إله إلا الله رب العرش الكريم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والغنيمة من كل بر والسلامة من كل إثم. اللهم لا تدع لي ذنبا إلا غفرته ولا هما إلا فرجته ولا سقما إلا شفيته ولا عيبا إلا سترته ولا رزقا إلا بسطته ولا خوفا إلا آمنته ولا سوءا إلا صرفته ولا حاجة هي لك رضا ولي فيها صلاح إلا قضيتها يا أرحم الراحمين. آمين رب العالمين. صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Ma'aminin, just a couple of quick announcements. Inshallah, from the end of May to the first week of June 2024, we are planning for our second ziyarah trip with the Ark of Salvation here at CFK to the holy cities in Iraq. Inshallah, we plan on spending 10 days in Iraq with the presence of our scholars, Sheikh Amin Rastani, Sheikh Mahdi Rastani, and Sheikh Bilal Hussain. These trips are an important part of the community building and carry many benefits for our families and youth. More information, such as registration links, will be sent out in the coming weeks. Capacity will be limited, and we urge everyone who would like to join to sign up as soon as the registration is out. Another reminder, on Tuesday, January 2nd, 2024, we will inshallah be celebrating the birth of Our Lady Fatima salamullah alayha, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farajaha, here at CFK with Sheikh Mahdi Rastani. Event details and timing will follow soon. As always, our event details are posted on our webpage, cfkdfw.org, where you can subscribe to our newsletter and to our WhatsApp group, and also donate and sponsor programs. Jazakallah to all our sustaining members, donors, volunteers, and program sponsors for your contributions. If you are not a member, please consider becoming one by contacting our membership director, Brother Asif Patel. For opportunities to donate, sponsor programs, or help behind the scenes, please speak to myself or any of the volunteers. I would like to request everyone now to please recite a Surah Fatiha for the marhumin of today's Niyaz sponsors. Let us please also include our own marhumin and the marhumin of the Ummah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى وأن عليا حجة الله صلى حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم ارزقنا توفيق الطاعة وبعد المعصية اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وتقبل شفاعته وارفع درجته. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. سبحان الله. الحمد لله. سبحان الله. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. سبحان الله. سبحان الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
اللهم
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ما شاء الله لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Inshallah, recite Dua Wahadat all together. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لا إله إلا الله إلها واحدا ونحن له مسلمون. لا إله إلا الله ولا نعبد إلا إياه مخلصين له الدين ولو كره المشركون لا إله إلا الله ربنا ورب آبائنا الأولين لا إله إلا الله وحده وحده أنجز وعدا ونصر عبدا وعز جندا وهزم الأحزاب وحده فله الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت ويميت ويحيي وهو حي لا يموت بيده الخير وهو على كل شيء قدير.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا حبيب الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين، السلام على 9 المعصومين من ذرية الحسين، السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان، السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان ورحمة الله وبركاته، السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل